The NFL is built on rules, strict ones, limits on practice hours, limits on coach-player contact, limits designed to keep competitive balance intact. But tonight, reports are claiming that balance may have just been challenged in a way the league never saw coming. According to growing buzz around the league, Shedeur Sanders and John Harbaugh may have uncovered a legal gray area so powerful that it has league executives scrambling behind the scenes. Not because of a normal coaching hire, not because of a blockbuster trade, but because of an alleged workaround that, if proven real, would change how quarterbacks are developed forever. The claim that Harbaugh didn't just align himself with a team, he aligned himself directly with Sanders through a private, off-the-books consulting arrangement that exists outside NFL jurisdiction. And if that's true, it would mean something unprecedented. A coach legally able to mentor, advise, and develop a quarterback year-round without violating a single line of the CBA. No offseason blackout. No communication limits. No league oversight. Rumors suggest NFL owners immediately recognized the danger. Reports claim panic calls began flying. It's been said league officials warned teams not to explore similar setups while they review the implications. Even longtime power brokers allegedly see this as the start of something they can't control. And that's what makes this story explosive. Because this isn't just about money. It isn't just about coaching. It's about power, who has it, who controls development, and whether the old rules still apply in a league built on restriction. If these claims hold weight, the NFL isn't just dealing with a clever loophole. It's staring at a blueprint that could redefine the future of quarterback dominance. And that's exactly why everyone is paying attention. To understand why this situation has the NFL buzzing, you first have to understand how tightly controlled the league actually is. The NFL doesn't just regulate games on Sundays, it regulates time. Who can talk to whom, when they can do it, and for how long. Under the collective bargaining agreement, coaches are restricted from having ongoing contact with players during the offseason. Practice hours are capped. Film sessions are limited. Even casual football instruction is monitored once the season ends. The idea is simple. No team should gain an unfair developmental advantage just because they have deeper pockets or louder voices. Every organization plays inside those lines. At least they're supposed to. That's why the recent reports surrounding Shedeur Sanders and John Harbaugh immediately set off alarms. Because what's being discussed isn't a violation of the rules, it's something far more dangerous to the league. A workaround. The CBA governs teams. It governs employees. It governs league-affiliated activity. What it does not clearly govern is private business relationships that exist entirely outside the NFL's ecosystem. And that's where the tension begins. Rumors suggest that this alleged arrangement doesn't involve a team facility. It doesn't involve official practices, and it doesn't involve the Browns' payroll. Instead, it's framed as a private consulting relationship, coach to individual operating beyond the league's direct authority. If true, that means no off-season blackout applies. No communication window closes. No football activity clock ever stops. And that's exactly why owners would be furious. Because the entire system is built on the assumption that development slows down once the season ends. That quarterbacks don't get year-round elite coaching unless the league allows it. That no single player can stack thousands of extra mental reps while everyone else waits for OTAs to reopen. But if this structure holds up under scrutiny, that assumption collapses. Suddenly, the richest, smartest, and most ambitious quarterbacks could legally surround themselves with Hall of Fame minds year-round, not as coaches, but as consultants. And the league would have no clean way to stop it without rewriting the CBA entirely. That's why this isn't just a rumor. It's a stress test. And the moment league executives realized that the rulebook might not cover this scenario, the conversation shifted from curiosity to containment. Because if one player can do this, others won't be far behind. And that's when competitive balance stops being theoretical. This is where the story stops sounding like normal NFL drama and starts sounding like something the league never planned for. According to reports and growing insider chatter, the relationship between Shedeur Sanders and John Harbaugh may not be happening through traditional football channels at all. Not a team contract, not an advisory role with the Browns, but an entirely separate, privately structured consulting arrangement. And that distinction changes everything. Rumors suggest this agreement exists outside the NFL's employment framework. Harbaugh wouldn't be acting as a team employee in this context. He wouldn't be coaching practices, installing schemes, or running drills under league supervision. Instead, he'd be advising Sanders as a private consultant, similar, in theory, to how quarterbacks already work with personal trainers, throwing coaches, or QB gurus in the offseason. But the scale is what makes this different. Unlike a mechanics coach or a skills trainer, Harbaugh is a Super Bowl winning head coach with decades of system-level knowledge, film study, defensive tendencies, game management, situational football, everything teams spend years developing internally. If he's sharing that knowledge privately year-round, it raises a question the CBA never clearly answered. Where does coaching end and consulting begin? The league's rules are designed to prevent teams from gaining extra reps. They were never designed to stop a player from paying for advice. And that gray area is exactly what has executives uneasy. Because if this structure is legal, even temporarily, it opens a door the NFL can't easily close. No facility use. No official practices. No team supervision. Just information. Reports claim that's why this situation has league offices scrambling. Not because a rule was broken, but because one might be irrelevant. The CBA assumes development is tied to teams. This alleged setup detaches development from teams entirely and ties it directly to personal capital. And that's a dangerous precedent. Because if Sanders can do this, so can every top rookie with endorsement money, every veteran quarterback with leverage, every franchise star willing to invest in his own evolution. Suddenly, development isn't capped by league calendars, it's capped by imagination and resources. It's important to say this clearly. Nothing has been officially confirmed. No contract has been publicly filed. No memo has been released for verification. But the reason this story won't go away is simple. If it is real, it doesn't just bend the rules. It exposes a blind spot the NFL never thought to defend. And once a blind spot is visible, it doesn't stay empty for long. If this alleged setup even halfway holds up, it explains why league executives and owners would be on edge. Because this isn't about one quarterback getting smarter. It's about the entire economic and competitive structure of the NFL being quietly threatened. For decades, the league has sold parity as its crown jewel. Hard caps, draft order, practice limits, controlled access to coaching. The idea that no matter how rich or powerful a team is, development happens on roughly the same timeline for everyone. That illusion only works if the rules apply evenly. This alleged loophole blows a hole straight through that idea. Reports claim owners immediately recognize the ripple effect. If a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders can privately retain a coach of John Harbaugh's caliber, then development becomes a function of personal wealth, not league structure. The richest players gain year-round access to elite football minds, while others are forced to wait for OTAs and training camp. That's not competitive balance, that's an arms race. And it doesn't stop at quarterbacks. Imagine elite pass rushers hearing former defensive coordinators, wide receivers working year-round with retired Hall of Fame position coaches, entire private ecosystems of football intelligence operating outside league oversight. The CBA wasn't built to police that reality. That's where panic sets in. It's been said league offices immediately began discussing preemptive action, not because a rule was broken, but because once something becomes common practice, it's nearly impossible to reverse. Owners fear a future where development is no longer standardized, but personalized, privatized, and unregulated. That fear cuts deep for smaller market teams. Teams without massive endorsement ecosystems rely on structure to compete. They rely on controlled calendars and equal access to coaching. If that disappears, talent consolidation accelerates. The league stops being about scouting and coaching efficiency and starts being about which players can afford the best private infrastructure. That's why this isn't just a Brown story. It's a league story. And it's also why reports suggest some owners are already pushing for clarification, warnings, or even emergency language changes before this becomes a blueprint. Because once players realize the power they have outside team control, the old hierarchy starts to crack. The irony: the NFL created this environment itself. Nil money, branding power, player independence. The league encouraged stars to become businesses. Now those businesses may be reinvesting in football knowledge the league can't regulate. If this loophole exists, the owner's fear isn't hypothetical. It's existential. Because the moment players control their own development timelines, the balance of power shifts permanently. Strip away the contracts, the panic, and the league politics, and one name keeps sitting at the center of everything: Shedeur Sanders. That's not an accident. If you're a coach like John Harbaugh, you don't risk your legacy, your reputation, or your leverage for just anyone. You do it for a quarterback you believe can be molded into something special, someone who hasn't been ruined by bad habits, broken systems, or years of instability. And Sanders fits that profile perfectly. He's young but battle-tested. He's already operated under extreme pressure both on the field and in the media. He's carried rebuilding programs. He's dealt with scrutiny most quarterbacks never experience until late in their careers. And most importantly, he's still teachable. His game isn't fixed. His habits aren't locked in. He's a blank canvas. That's the kind of quarterback elite coaches dream about. Reports suggest this is exactly why Harbaugh's alleged demands are so aggressive. They aren't about ego. They're about insulation, about creating an environment where development isn't compromised by front office interference, half measures, or competing agendas. Total roster control, full authority, a massive staff budget. Every demand points to one goal: building a structure where Sanders can grow without friction. And history backs that thinking. Harbaugh won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco, a quarterback many dismissed as limited, by tailoring the offense around what he did best. He helped elevate Lamar Jackson from raw athlete to MVP by reshaping an entire system to fit his strengths. When Harbaugh commits, he commits fully, and he demands the tools to do it right. Now imagine him looking at Sanders, a quarterback with accuracy, poise, creativity, and the willingness to work. Someone who hasn't yet been defined by failure or cynicism. Someone who can still be shaped by elite coaching before bad habits calcify. That's why this moment feels different. Cleveland isn't just searching for a coach. It's searching for a reset, philosophically and culturally. Sanders represents the future they haven't yet ruined. Harbaugh represents the credibility they desperately need. Together, they form a rare alignment of timing, talent, and opportunity. And that's why, if these reports are even partially true, this isn't about bending rules for convenience. It's about a legendary coach identifying his next great project and refusing to take it on unless the environment guarantees success. Because for Harbaugh, this wouldn't be just another job. It would be a final statement. And Sanders would be the centerpiece. This is the part of the story that made NFL executives sit up straight, because these weren't normal coaching demands. According to multiple reports and league chatter, John Harbaugh didn't enter discussions asking for collaboration. He entered with a blueprint, and it came with non-negotiable terms. First, the money. Reports claim Harbaugh is seeking $20 million per year, a figure reserved only for the most elite coaches in the game. That alone sends a message. This isn't a coach looking for security. This is a coach who believes he's about to build something worth paying for at the highest level. But the salary wasn't the real shock. The second demand was a $10 million staff budget, an unprecedented number in NFL circles. This isn't about loyalty hires or developmental assistants. This is about assembling what amounts to a football think tank, top-tier coordinators, quarterback specialists, analysts who live in film rooms, minds specifically chosen to accelerate quarterback development at every level. Then came the line that reportedly made front offices uneasy. Total control over the final 53-man roster. No ownership meddling. No front office overrides. No compromises for optics or contracts. If Harbaugh needs an offensive lineman instead of a defensive star, that's the pick. If a receiver doesn't fit the system, he's gone regardless of name or salary. This demand isn't about power for power's sake. It's about eliminating friction that derails development, especially at quarterback. And finally, the most aggressive demand of all: the right to choose his own general manager. Not work alongside one. Not collaborate. Choose. That's unheard of in modern NFL structures, but it's been said Harbaugh views this as essential. He's not interested in internal battles over draft philosophy or free agent priorities. He wants alignment from the top down, one vision, one voice, one plan. When you connect the dots, the picture becomes clear. These demands aren't random. They all point toward the same objective: creating a protected ecosystem where a young quarterback, specifically Shedeur Sanders, can develop without organizational chaos. And Cleveland, more than any other franchise, understands the cost of getting this wrong. After the Deshaun Watson disaster, after years of resets and misfires, reports suggest the Browns may finally be desperate enough to say yes. Because compared to what they've already spent, these demands aren't reckless. They're corrective. This isn't Harbaugh asking for control because he wants authority. It's Harbaugh demanding control because he knows exactly what happens when coaches don't have it, especially when the future of a franchise quarterback is on the line. And that's why these demands feel less like arrogance and more like a warning. This is the part no one in the league wants to say out loud, but everyone understands it anyway. If any franchise is capable of agreeing to demands this extreme, it's the Cleveland Browns. Because desperation changes math. Cleveland already crossed every traditional red line once before: multiple first-round picks, a fully guaranteed mega contract, total organizational commitment, all for Deshaun Watson, a move that didn't just fail but detonated publicly. The financial damage, the on-field disappointment, the cultural fallout, it became the cautionary tale every front office whispers about. And now here they are again. A young quarterback with upside, a fan base starving for hope, a locker room tired of resets, and a Hall of Fame level coach saying, "I can fix this, but only if you get out of the way." That's why reports suggest Cleveland isn't reacting to Harbaugh's demands with shock the way other teams are. They're reacting with calculation. Because when you've already paid the price for half measures, the idea of going all in one last time starts to feel logical. Look at the numbers. A $10 million staff budget sounds wild until you remember how much Cleveland already burned trying to figure it out. Compared to guaranteed money flushed away, that figure starts to look like insurance. Total roster control sounds extreme until you remember how front office interference has undercut coaches here for years. Choosing his own GM sounds radical, until you remember how misalignment has killed continuity in this building over and over again. In other words, these demands don't scare Cleveland. They describe Cleveland. And that's what makes this moment dangerous and fascinating. Because if the Browns agree, they aren't just hearing a coach. They're admitting their old model failed completely. They're acknowledging that structure without trust doesn't work. That development without protection collapses. That young quarterbacks can't survive in chaos, no matter how talented they are. That's where Shedeur Sanders comes back into focus. Cleveland doesn't just need him to succeed. They need him to be the proof that this reset was worth it. That giving one voice total control can finally stabilize a franchise defined by instability. Harbaugh understands that leverage. He knows Cleveland is the one place desperate enough to meet his terms because they don't want another half-decade lost to indecision. And that's why this isn't a bidding war. It's a fork in the road. Either Cleveland commits fully to a unified vision built around Sanders, or it risks sliding right back into the cycle it swore it was done repeating. For the Browns, this decision isn't about cost. It's about whether they're finally willing to change how they operate, or just rename the same mistake. If even part of this story proves true, the NFL isn't just facing another off-season rumor cycle. It's staring at a turning point. What's being discussed here goes far beyond whether John Harbaugh ends up in Cleveland or how much power he demands. It's about whether the league's carefully controlled ecosystem can survive in an era where players are no longer just athletes. They're corporations with leverage, resources, and options the rulebook never anticipated. At the center of it all sits Shedeur Sanders. Not because he's already proven everything, but because he represents something the NFL is still uncomfortable with. A young quarterback who might be developed outside the league's traditional timeline, power structure, and oversight. If Sanders can legally surround himself with elite football minds year-round, the old development curve collapses. Patience becomes optional, rebuilds accelerate, and the gap between prepared and unprepared franchises widens fast. That's why owners would panic. This isn't about fairness in theory. It's about control in practice. The NFL has always limited access because access creates advantage. And once advantage becomes purchasable at the individual level, the league's balance of power tilts away from teams and toward players. For Cleveland, this moment is existential. Agreeing to Harbaugh's reported demands would mean admitting everything that came before failed. It would mean placing the future of the franchise into one unified vision and betting that structure, authority, and elite coaching can finally protect a young quarterback instead of breaking him. Refusing those demands likely means another reset, another compromise, another cycle that ends the same way. And for the rest of the league, they're watching closely. Because if this works, if Sanders develops faster, cleaner, and more confidently than anyone expected, the copycats won't be far behind. Quarterbacks will invest in their own ecosystems. Coaches will follow leverage instead of logos. And the league will be forced to rewrite rules it never thought it would need. But if it fails, the NFL gets its cautionary tale. Proof that structure still matters more than innovation. Proof that some lines shouldn't be crossed. That's the tension. This isn't just a coaching saga. It's a test of whether the NFL can contain a future it helped create. A future where players don't wait for permission to evolve. Where development isn't leased from teams, it's owned. The decision Cleveland makes next won't just shape its own destiny. It may quietly decide how much control the league still has over the stars who power it.